Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, most true, authentic business voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, meet the person of your dreams, hit the lotto, make billions of dollars, sell all your books. I'm not promising those last couple yet, but we're working hard on those things. And the reason I feel like you can get to that point is because we bring people on who walk the walk. Tonight is no exception. I am really excited to bring back, I'm honored to bring my friend, Culture Matters CEO, Jay Doran. Jay, thanks for being back here, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It took everything for me to not say, pleasure's all yours. And then I did it.
But now you just did. So there you have it, right?
That's folks, the whole metaphor for tonight.
Folks,
culture.
The pleasure is all ours. And now we understand why culture matters. Actually, I don't. But the fact is, I've had some head starts. Pop culture over coffee. Folks, one of the things that, like I said, if you are a listener of the show, then you know Jay's been with me before. And if I'm lucky, Jay will be with me again, because the fact is, you heard, we introduced Jay and went through the initial parts. Like, I'm lucky because I've known Jay now for a number of years, and I've watched and felt and enjoyed the evolution. But for a guy who is an author, podcast host, a corporate consultant, runs his own company, I still feel like there's a lot of stuff that I would love to be able to identify, because I just find that, as I said, it's just, in addition to the fact that I find my friend funny, intelligent, engaging, progressive in terms of thought and action, I just find, as I said, I think the business model that has been created is wildly unusual. A little less unusual now, but even a few years ago, I wasn't aware of very many people, if anybody, who were doing it. Jay, the basic question is, when did you realize culture mattered to you?
Can I share a quote?
Please.
You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star.
Who's the author?
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay.
There's a couple answers to that.
Yeah.
The one that I started with within my first awareness was team meetings that I had the opportunity to hold.
Okay. I
had been inspired, a mentor, a partner had said, Jay, it would be good for the company, for us, for you to hold the meeting, the team meeting. First, I was uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
I was unsure. And it was like lightning. It was life-changing to put myself before a group and share how I felt about why we were doing what we were doing, what it was that I thought we were doing, and where I thought we could be going. Okay. When I get anxious and afraid and scared and uncertain, over the years, I go to Barnes and Noble to find information, to give myself a level of power. And it was in these early days of holding these meetings to get clear on what it was we're doing and why we were doing and so on and so forth, that this book stuck out to me that just caught my eye. And I went up to the book, and it was called, and this is for any of the listeners that might be helpful to them, it was called Uncontainable. And it was a story about the Container Store.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the first page, you open it up and you read the left-hand panel of the book, it just hit me. Wow. What are our values? What do we stand for? So at the first level, it was, what are our values? What do we stand for? And how do I represent these? How do I articulate these? How can I create that buy-in? That was the beginning level of Culture Matters. But I think the depth of it over years now, and years, over 8 years or so of pursuing culture mattering within a context of being an advisor to owner-operators of businesses at varying degrees of size and scale. I think I personally have always been searching for identity. I think I've personally always been searching for culture. Having been saved, brought into a family young, having narrowly escaped the auspices of the foster system. So that's a highfalutin way of saying, I was adopted by a wonderful mother who loves me and I love her, and going through those trials and tribulations of growing up. So I could continue, but there's originally it was, wow, what do we stand for? Why do we stand for it? How to represent the values of the organization in a way that my peers, people I'm shoulder to shoulder fighting with, are people.
Yeah.
We could live the values that we thought would be most beneficial for delivering the product, delivering the service, delivering value to the customer. And it was in those meetings that I was struck with maybe my love for teaching. We'll start there. Right.
So let me ask you, that's great. Was the book, when you found it's Uncontained, right? Uncontainable.
I think I have it in the office.
So now I need to know, but I was going to say, because I'll have it. But was that from an early meeting? Was that like when you said, all right, so it was suggested you run the meeting? What were the early meetings like for you?
There were none. There really weren't those rituals yet instantiated into the organization.
How's it start?
There was a tremendous amount of inspiration, and when you have a startup,
right?
If it's started by people that are up early and are down late, I mean, you're on a mission,
right?
If you're on a mission, anyone listening to this can be on a mission,
right?
We were on a mission. We had something to prove. We wanted something. People were attracted to that. So even without the ritual of getting together and sharing the excitement, sharing the information, sharing the where we're going. And of course, I want to be clear, I didn't learn the listening part.
Oh.
Because, when you're talking in front of a group, it wasn't clear that, I'm supposed to be listening. It took years to figure that out. And then, so there weren't any. And then once there was one, it was an everyday thing. It was an everyday thing. I'm an obsessive type. I don't do something once. I made on July 2nd a goal personally to do 100 push-ups every day. So I'm doing them.
How many days
to write 100 personal? I mean, I can jump, but
but let me ask you. So it's now August 20X, because we're technically not live, right? But let's say, I'm sorry, I lied. So today is September X.
That's funny.
And how many days have you missed of the 100 push-ups so far?
No, I don't miss.
See, that's important, and that's why I'm asking. That's to me. So you say you're an obsessive person. I love this. But
okay, so here we go. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're not. You're great. I want to hear you. Nobody needs to hear me.
Well, I like to hear you. Thank you. Consistency is a variable of culture. However, it doesn't necessarily mean culture. What's culture? Well, let's say open feedback loops. Let's say open communication. Let's say trust. Let's say the ability to speak. Let's say the feeling of being heard. Let's say inclusion, like includedness. Let's say, so I can continue, but consistency helps. Consistency helps clarify, cut through. So when there's, let's say, the leader, whomever is in the position of leadership, lacking consistency, it's like the taught versus caught idea.
Okay,
people
right.
will catch the lesson in their observation of the leader. So I'll give that to those that have been protagonists in my early adolescence, like my mother, Barbara. When she didn't want to do something, she stopped. I think I learned from that. I'll honor her consistency, the ability to control my impulses, discipline. I've had great mentors in my life. So once I decide to not do something or to do something, I will keep it. Are there exceptions? There have been, closer to my weakness, the ultimate weaknesses. I'm going to unpack that. But like the heart, the closer to something is to a blind spot, the more difficult it is to be consistent. That's where the call to mentorship and so on, accountability. Anyway, every day. And I'll give myself these tasks or these commitments that I'll put my word to increase the likelihood that I can ideally build my character, which is another component of culture, the character of whomever's in position. Well, everyone within a culture. I hope that's.
Do you think, definitely answers, do you think consistency is teachable, or do you think of it as an inherent character trait that you've been lucky enough to have had as part of your DNA?
Well, let's say, if I don't know the answer to that question. The genes and the nature nurture argument, the question is, what if it's both and the order matters? So contextually, let's say that I'm in a position and I'm not in a position of authority within my organization. I'm brand new to the organization.
Right.
And maybe I have a role that there aren't a lot of people that are looking to me for guidance. I can actually impact the culture by being consistent in whatever task I have as an individual. What would lead me to that? It's complicated. I don't know. Do I believe that someone can be? Yeah, I tend to be glass half full, right? The teacher. Yes, you can learn this. So I think that the impact other people have on us below our awareness is great, is grand, maybe even grander than we even can recognize. Meaning, people are, if I'm not consistent, those that are in a position to look up to me for guidance, why would they? Now they could, because they're individuals. Well, if they do, so I think that if they do, then are they like, who's the leader? Is it me or them? Well, maybe they're the leader and I'm positionally the authority. So I don't know the philosophical answer, because I think it becomes a philosophical question, like, nature nurture. I think it's both, and the order matters. And I'm trying to figure out my understanding of the answer, which is one of the reasons why I pursue this type of social, pseudoscience work of consulting.
Oh, I love the way
people.
that you, at least, this is a terrible choice of words, but it's the best I can do, that you bother to unpack it, that you actually bother to take the time and effort to, and actually care to unpack it. The reason I ask that is, look, as you are leading businesses, or leading by you coming in, instilling the culture, the playbook, the systems, what have you. One of the biggest things I've for myself in business, and I've done it, so I don't want to just point at other people, is the inability to remain consistent. So businesses take on initiatives all the time. We're going to do blah, blah, blah. We're going to take on culture and we're going to do until the first bad day. And then it's like, you know what? We're going to not have those meetings every day. When you were saying we went from like, Jay, you're going to lead the meeting, to we're going to have them every day, to it's like, oh, we had a bad quarter. You know what? We're probably going to let those meetings go. And we're going to focus instead on lead generation, And that's why it's like, for me, was it exhilarating when you first started doing this? Was it frustrating? Was it challenging? It's not just what were the results.
I wasn't thinking.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Because, thinking takes pause.
Right. Someone
starting a business, it's difficult to pause when you're unable to pause. You've got to survive. It's a lot intuitive, entrepreneurialism. A lot of it's intuitive. Figure it out as you go, solve as you go. That's one of the values of having that external advisor, that external counsel. So, for example, one of the symptoms of success is entitlement. I mean, if we have enough of it, we're in a place of complacency, even below our awareness. It would take some reason subjectively to move when we're not in fight or flight. So how would that be created? We'd have to get clear on why it is we even do this in the first place, because something's driving us that isn't socioeconomic, or, it's not reactive state. It's like, what's our actual meaning? Why are we actually doing this? Who are we actually accountable for as an organization, for example, or is our shareholders? What level of accountability to our customer? So it's, what's the plan? Why are we doing this? What's the plan? How can we get there? Doing that creates proactivity. Proactivity that's committed to leads to outcomes. Outcomes, like consequence. Let's say they're good outcomes.
Exactly.
Okay. That leads to responsiveness, which is reactive inherently, but our ability to respond, our responsibility, depending on the actual plan and the inclusion, the communication, the trust, the interaction of people, will respond proactively or reactively. See, proactive planning, action, interaction, action, creates outcome, creates success. The outcomes, the consequences create reactivity. We have to battle that reactivity. So as we succeed, we actually undermine ourselves. As companies, cultures succeed, they undermine themselves. It's a constant, it's like a spiral, and it's spiraling up or, down, and, there's volatility. Anyway, so I would say that there's an inherent entitlement in nature, in a sense, that we're battling. And
that happened to me personally. That happened to me, and that's why I was going to say that really struck a chord. So when you were saying it was like I was starting to actually so when I launched my own company, Dolphin Media, say 4 years ago, right? I had come off of a lengthy career in broadcast ad sales and did well. For a bunch of time. And I'm not going to try to play like glory days and all that stuff, right? But I had the entitlements. It's funny because there wasn't, as I look back on 4 years ago, there wasn't a huge sense, I was about to say, any real sense of urgency. There wasn't. I know that the entitlement part was, when I think about the beginning process, was I left the job ended at Univision for me, right? And so there was this gap, and first thing I did is I planned a trip and went to Hawaii. And it's like, that's not exactly urgent. I'm not beating myself up, but and extended that trip 3 times. And so it was like, was I working there? Yes, some. Was I frolicking on a beach? Yeah, a lot. And so that sense of, when you're starting out in a business as an entrepreneur, whatever, it doesn't get, as I've now learned, much more urgent than that. And the opportunity window becomes so short. So my thought is, one of the reasons I find you so invaluable is because you can remind people of that. So I let a ton of time go off the clock because I didn't feel any sort of a sense of urgency. And I'll add one more thing in terms of an observation of what you just said. You were talking about the response. In my mind, I kept adding a word to what you were saying, which was your response time. Sometimes the responses are good and bad in regards to the decisions. But my question to you is, like I said, are you able to impact the response time? Because getting to an emergency 3 days after it happens is often a problem. And that's where I wonder, when you're speaking to businesses and you're talking about response and the actions and becoming proactive and reactive, how do you communicate the sense of time response? Urgent.
Well, I that's not how I interact with organizations, being that I'm more behind the scenes of whomever's in operating control. But I would argue that that will be proportional to that person's. You could argue responsibility, because it's responsibility However, it's not necessarily the responsibility that, the general literature may acknowledge, or people say, oh yeah, that's a responsible person. It could be determined. Well, it's highly determined by what the heck is driving said individual. Let me go back for a second.
Yeah,
when
please.
you're articulating your belief of, you're acknowledging your own perceivable entitlement earlier.
Yes.
In your defense, as a citizen of that institution, of that culture, as a citizen of that country, as an employee of that organization, it wouldn't be surprising for someone who feels disenfranchised from the institution, who may have repressed their thoughts, feelings, and emotions as a reaction to a non-inclusive ecosystem,
right,
to go away and lower anxiety. And it's a positive marker of your aforementioned personal responsibility in your life, that you were even in a position of entitlement, meaning you were able to save capital, you were able to, like, you were in a place in your life where you could do that. It actually speaks to your personal responsibility as a human, and it shares a potential marker, for the lack of inclusion in the institution that would lead a tenured employee to need to go away and enjoy themselves, decompress, to lower anxiety, and get clear on the vision, because it's hard to get clear on a vision with increased anxiety, and anxiety is tied to how people relate to one another. So if people on this podcast are listening are feeling, I don't feel heard at work, or I don't feel heard, insert medium, that a symptom of that can be angst, and symptom of that can be distraction, and that would be, e.g., pleasure, blah 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 blah. So excitement, euphoria, the search for dopamine, all these things. So I want to, that's an important place to start in my mind, because the personal, the response time piece arguably can be proportional to impulse control. And impulse control can be tied to, why the heck is someone doing what they're doing? For example, if someone is on their last dollar, we're in fight or flight mode. There's no time to think twice, to procrastinate. If the species does, the species dies. This is where some of those adages become helpful to people to say in the mirror: burn the boats, burn the boats, burn the boats, burn the boats. And so, it's anyway, that would be like the first part of my answer. And by the way, those meetings every day, because that was kind of where.
No, but I wanted. That's awesome. Oh, by the way, forgive me, Lou. Forgive me, folks, if you're watching us. Me moving my head. Be right back. Keep talking.
Oh, you're going over there. All right. No, that's
okay,
it.
I'm back.
This started with that book, right? In the 1978, I think Kip Tindall started this idea of having a store where people could get organized. It was like, there was this, that was what it compelled me. I was like, wow, there's this clear reason why they started this. It struck me. Right. So anyone listening to this that has a business, why are you in business? And do your customers know? Do you know? Is it clear to you? Because if you're not on your last dollar selling and trying to make your life work in the context of an entrepreneur, the motivation is going to come from commitment over time, but it's paradoxical, because commitment over time, how do you keep commitments if you're not committed?
Right.
Right. So part of how one can start the pendulum, or the domino effect of keeping commitments, is to get clear on why they're doing what they're doing, and what they actually provide to the market, and how they're going to go do it. That's where it's like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? How do I actually do it? What's the plan? And then it's like, on a micro level, am I doing what I have to do every day? But this is the thing. The brain says, let me do this, let me do this, let me do this. The brain won't say, let me do this, let me do this, let me do this as much if the person is like up, their back up against the wall.
Yes.
It can still do that. People end up just going work for somebody else. That's where hiring help, having mentors, having paid counsel, having specific consultants for, that anchor, having that mentor external that has objectivity can help someone get what they have to get done. And none of us are above that. Well, we can convince ourselves that we are, or I have done it. And anyway, so is that helpful?
It's extremely helpful. So I want to ask two follow-up questions. One of them is this. When you talked about finding the book, and I mentioned this to you before, and folks, as you get to continue to know Jay Doran, one of the things that you will realize is when you're following Jay on social media, the references that are utilized, the audiobook quotes, posts, I don't know if I know anyone who is as voracious of a reader as Jay. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone. I'm watching, as we're doing this, if you're watching us on video, you see what I'm going to say is a tiny portion of the books that Jay Doran has in his possession. We're seeing a tiny representative sample. When did you become a voracious reader, or were you always?
Yeah, and this is something that, okay. I do physically read every day. It's something that I've done more and more of as I've matured intellectually and emotionally.
Okay.
But I want to make a distinction.
Yeah.
Audio books, audio learning changed the trajectory of my life. So it's both that occur.
Yep.
I'm definitely a bibliophile.
Oh, I'm sorry. I count them both as the same.
Well, right. So this is the thing. The science on that is debatable. We can talk about that in other episodes. The reason I bring that up is I've had criticism of people, because every year I post my reading list.
Yep.
Books that I started, books that I read. I actually track all of it, and I also track, and I'll get to the answer. I track YouTube, meaning I track videos I watch. I track documentaries. I track all consumable information. I've been doing this for years, but it's gotten more and more intense every year. I got feedback on my post last year from a friend who was brave enough to tell me what they thought. Carl Eppolito. Okay. Are you talking about physical books or audio books? And I said, well, it's both. And this is such a helpful critique that I greatly appreciate the bravery to share in the public, through the public forum. Right. And the reason I want to make that distinction is, well, first of all, reading is not listening. They're different. Listening changed the trajectory of my life. Physically reading books is a different experience that levels me up every day. I have found in myself, I'll speak for myself, I'm like this conversation. Right. I'm reading, I'm all over the place. Okay. So I'll read a book physically for 20 minutes and then go listen to an audiobook for 10 minutes of a different book and then go back to the other one and then go to another one. I don't have a learning style. I just am a learning person. So I'm saying this for all the people out there that may never have listened to audiobooks and shied away from reading because they're not sure how to read. Right. How they read wasn't institutionalized in a way that they took to it. Because I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs and worked with many, and the feedback I get is a lot of people don't know that audio learning is for them. And I've seen unbelievable transformations happen from listening for entrepreneurial humans that I've interacted with that didn't go, very smart people, didn't go to the Ivy League necessarily, or maybe finish school. So it's both. I didn't physically read really until I was almost in my early 20s. Yeah. Okay. I've listened to over 10,000 hours of Audible on close to 11,000 hours on Audible. I've listened and physically read. I've gone through a tremendous, what could be, that's all subjective. What I consider, I spent a lot of time in that effort. So I'm saying that though specifically because I've met so many people in business that, think about it, it's like if you're selling and serving your customers,
right,
and interacting with your employees, you're not a professor.
No.
You need to get to work. It's those car rides. It's listen, or it's the 10 minutes before bed to physically read. It's a different experience. So I used to group them, and I got counsel, like feedback from someone.
Yeah.
It was very helpful. And I think it's better to discern the two. And I try to physically read more and more every day. And I listen every day. And I'm trying to track it because I want to look back in 80 years and be a case study for people that may have had a different non-contrived educational experience. Like myself, I didn't pursue academics. I was pursued right out of it. So and yet I've learned things and that people value. So I've figured out how to learn in a way that I learned. So I'm trying to track it so that when I'm dead, maybe that case study could be helpful to other human beings. You know what I'm saying?
I do. So we're not going to race that part along. I'd rather you hang around, but it's like
a constant. But remember, the role. We can go into it. But go ahead.
No, that's fine. But I was realizing, like for myself, is that it's no. I'm going to cut myself off. The role is please continue. I want to hear that.
Well, so the way I look at as an advisor and as a firm that provides services to organizations,
right,
as it relates to culture, business, and so on and so forth,
right.
If we're not in R&D 24/7, I mean, what's the long-term value to the customer? Because we have long-term relationships. If I'm consistently unlearning to add, new tools in the tool belt or frameworks and concepts, I just think if one's going to dedicate their life to teaching, and there's various ways to teach. You could speak at an audience. You could interact one-on-one. I mean, and we bring all these different elements. It's not that I do it because of what I'm saying. I just am a learner. And so I built a business around my personality. I'm self-aware about it, around who I am as a person and what I need to be as a person. But it's the learning is very important in my mind to be a professional advisor, a professional firm, learning. I think it's given me an edge, but I'm obsessed with it and I like it. I feed off of it and it helps me fulfill, as Schopenhauer said, money and fame is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. And I am an ego maniac in the making, and I need to continue learning so I can burden this level of insecurity and continue to be valuable to people like Adam Smith's, invisible hand.
So let me ask you something. You said, I want you to say the quote again. I don't mean exactly verbatim. It's your own quote. Well, if we're not in R&D mode, I just found that so powerful. Just say it again for me. Best you can.
I don't know the quote because it wasn't.
No, it don't matter. I'm just saying,
but we're not in R&D mode constantly. What long-term value can we provide to our customers?
Yeah, see,
long-term. And when I say long-term, it's like, let's say it's a year. Well, if I'm who I am today in a year, I've let myself down. So if I continue to level up, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have new customers. It doesn't mean that old customers won't graduate and evolve and potential. But Nietzsche, the pupil that doesn't outshine the master is let both themselves down and the master. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. People, it's okay to outgrow the teacher. Like Plato wrote for Socrates, that whole thing. But I've gotten a lot of meaning from it, and we've been continually able, in actual anecdotal experience, to be valuable for those that have chosen us and us them, and it's been very beautiful. So I'm very interested in continuing, but be clear, I'm no munificent. It's not that I'm doing this for the sick and the poor. I am selfishly learning for myself, and it's become valuable for people.
But that's, to me, why I find you so valuable, no pun intended, because it's literally, it's like, I never want to be around, and I fear it. One of my bigger fears of myself personally is I never want to be the guy telling like the Al Bundy football stories. I'm not quoting Sartre or what.
That's funny.
I'll quote Al Bundy. But I mean, oh, remember me? I threw 4 touchdowns in high school. And you know what I mean? And it's like, and that's it. And that's the end. And that's, to me, why it's like, I think this is so powerful what you're saying and how much that matters. Let me ask you something. You've quoted in the last 5 minutes several authors that I used to almost be afraid of. I mean, in terms of it being too deep and too existential and too tough to even follow. How do you find, is it just because you're intelligent or you're seeking the practical takeaways from what I feel like are the heaviest books like Sartre and about, how do you do it? You know what I mean? Like to speak about it in a way you're like, oh, okay, got it. I understand.
Well, I'd like to if I'm going to speak, in of value for the audience, I can say, in my own experience, there are things that I've pursued to learn that have gotten easier the more I pursued them.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I want to believe in people. I want to believe that if I put my mind to something, I can learn it to the, and I'm going to try. I'm not in control of whether I possibly can or can,
or
I have the interest that I'm going to pursue it.
Yeah.
So I hope that would lead anyone listening to it's because what I've noticed is, or psychologically, I think if anyone be careful, like to put me in a category, anyone listening to this, and I always think about this myself, to put me in a category above, we're equals, meaning we're human to human. Because sometimes when we doubt ourselves, a way to, subconsciously, a way to argue for the behaviors that we've been conditioned to, is to put somebody else in a bucket above us. So I don't want to perpetuate an idea that I am have some capabilities others may or may not. I don't see how that helps anyone. So I don't have answers to your questions. But I will say I'm curious. Now, how is that helpful for the audience in the sense of culture? I think curiosity creates openness. Like it's an impulse to openness. If I'm in a leadership position, and I want to get down to what's really going wrong right now. We have some problems. If I'm curious with my staff, they're going to tell me what they think. How can I be curious? Well, am I open enough am I vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what's going on. What do you think? So am I vulnerable to say, I'm not sure how to handle this. I hired you because I believed in you. This is your strength zone. And they ask openly, inquiring, what can we do about this? What do you see? That there's curiosity can create open communication. Open communication can create trust, meaning. Like if we have stresses because we have problems in the day-to-day, which are inevitable in business. If we have a product, we have a service, because there's a need that we believe we're going to fill. We're solving problems with delivering it. But in the exchange of delivering it, there's problems that arise. We gave our word. We have to
Mhm.
keep our word. We got the money. We got to
Yep.
deliver. So there's problems, just constant, like knots tying up,
Mhm.
right? Curiosity, being open, vulnerable, inquiring. So
Yep.
I am living my life in a way that I can bear, this opportunity to breathe, and curiosity has helped me do it.
Mhm.
And I found that helps organizations continue to innovate when they're working together towards what they would like to accomplish based on what they believe their value is to whoever it is that they serve. So I hope that's helpful too, because I'm trying to think, like, what would the audience, what could help the audience? Because there's different people.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like, is someone listening right now where in a position where they don't feel heard, they feel disenfranchised from
Yeah,
whatever
right.
they're working? Is there
Mhm.
someone that feels overwhelmed and uncertain of how to be the owner of an organization?
Mhm.
Because the CEO is a role where everyone has a view of how that role can be
Mhm.
acted out. There's a tremendous subjectivity to it. There's also specific markers of this is what has to get done so that we can get
Mhm.
here. And it's like, so is it the owner that's listening? Is it the C-suite that's listening? Is it the
Yeah.
brand new entrepreneur that's taken the leap of anxiety?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
so I'm
yeah.
trying to think, like, which
Sure.
audience should we speak to? Because
So,
I could do my best to speak to
mhm.
each. My primary
Mhm.
expertise in who I'm interacting with on a daily and weekly basis are the individuals with operating control, right? That would be not always the
Mhm.
founder, but the executive officer.
So why don't we start there? Because that way, to me, because rather than, I feel like a great way to, at least in the time remaining tonight, rather
We
than
only have
focus on
3 hours
everybody.
left.
Yep.
We only have 3 hours left.
It's gonna be a damn good 3 hours, folks. So just sit tight. But it's my thought is that it's, rather than needing to get to everyone, in scattershot, I would love to be able to, like, get like a little bit more immersed. Like, for me, like, a question I was going to ask you is this: when was the first time, outside of your own, like when you started to run the meetings, when was the first time you brought this into an organization and you knew not that it was going to work, that it was working? What was it like for you? Like, walk me through, without you obviously not telling me anything
Yeah.
proprietary or names and numbers, but what was it like for you, man?
Where this started was electric.
Mm-hmm. How
It was
so?
electric. If people, here's something that could be helpful.
Yeah.
We have Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're going to get together in person.
Oh, damn right we are.
Yeah. Man, think about that. Logically, it's not logical because
Mm-hmm.
we have Zoom.
Right.
We want to because there's meaning wrapped up within this relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Why is there meaning? I believe I've made an intention to get to know you, to get
Mm-hmm.
to learn from
Mm-hmm.
you, with you,
Mm-hmm.
to share what I think when I think what you're saying out of this mind, out of this world.
Yeah.
And vice versa. There's
Thank you.
trust that's built when we disagree on things.
1,000%. We've
My
done
first
the work.
experience, I'm sorry.
We've done the work, so to speak.
Okay, so I was in a position where I was called with a business to do the work, and my life was forever changed. There was no doubt that culture mattered. There was no doubt. Now, but what culture is, I mean, I could say, okay, culture is story.
Mm-hmm.
What's the story? And I'll be a bit more specific. I just don't want to share information that could be inappropriate based on the work.
Yeah, of course.
Story. What's the story of the organization?
Right.
What's the language of the organization?
Mm-hmm.
What are the values? Do people actually talk about them? Do they weaponize them against each other?
Mm-hmm.
Rituals. Do we meet? When we meet,
Mm-hmm.
are the meetings exciting?
Mm-hmm.
Is there conflict?
Mm-hmm.
Because if there is, that's good. If it's respectful,
Okay.
if it's with tact, if it's with, if the values, and you tend to figure out quick that we just say the values in different ways, but the values, like people love, people like feeling respected, people
Absolutely
like being listened to.
Mm-hmm.
So the values tend to, they're represented in all these different ways, but we can feel when we have a culture, and we can feel when it's being ripped from our fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
So rituals help that, but that's not the end all. Getting together, a bad meeting is one that's just going to reveal the culture as what it is. We're not talking. We don't understand what the real problem is. So I can continue. What's the story? What's the language? What are the rituals, mediums, how we're meeting, when we're meeting, how symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
How do we represent our pride in what it is we do and who we do it with? And hero, do we trust the leadership? Not do we idolize them or worship them, but do we trust them?
Yeah.
And the distinction there is great. It's the difference in cult and culture. Closed system, open system. But the whole thing is systems that are open, close. Complicated. So in my experience, I experienced myself in a position of operating and representing love.
Okay.
And I've since spent now a lot of time, in my estimation, trying to figure out what happened and what is culture. And some of what culture is story and language and rituals, and anyone can go and look into organizational psych and anthropology, and there's really great literature on, and consulting generally has tried and failed in various ways, taking the understanding in the literature of anthropology and bringing it into the corporate life cycle.
Okay.
I do want to talk about the fluffy part of it, and failed greatly. So what it has been for me was feeling something that I think we can all feel, like when we really are bought in to who we are as a culture. What's culture? People. How about that?
Well,
and
yeah.
how people relate to one another and work together. And so it's an overwhelmingly complex subject, which keeps my mind busy. So I like it.
Yeah, and exactly. Right.
That would be, it's a long-term play. Culture is not for everybody. Culture isn't necessary to make a ton of money when money's cheap. Culture manifests itself. People manifest themselves. People work, like there's all sorts of different cultures. And it could be argued till we're blue in the face philosophically. Is that a cult? Is that not a cult? And that becomes like a regressive kind of conversation. But when it comes to business, those places that people just really want to be with for their career, there's upward mobility. Like we can build our life in that company. We want to build our life in that company.
Right.
I believe that's tied to what are the leaders up to? What types of people are they?
Yes.
How are they living their lives? And I've just chosen, and us as a firm, to partner with people that want long-term value, are less interested in eating the metaphorical marshmallow. There's a test where they gave kids marshmallows. Don't eat the marshmallow. The ones that ate it really quick were less successful, according to that metaphor. And so I'm trying to figure out what culture is. That's why I'm doing the dang thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And various consultants I've worked with and various advisors and so on and so forth, they seem to have a view that I'm helpful.
Oh,
I wouldn't want to say that I was the, go-to anything, because I feel dumber every day the more I study this.
but that's probably good. When you talked about if we're not doing our R&D all the time, that it's like if you're putting yourself in a position where you're putting more information in front of you.
Put it this way: there are certain elements that influence behavior. That's what marketers. Right. Okay, think like this: marketers figure out how humans, potential customers and customers can go up the value chain. Culture is about that internally and externally. Culture becomes brand. Believe consumers have an excess offer. Why? Culture becomes that. It's how people relate within the institution. Like our culture in this organization we call our country today is not able to communicate the way that maybe it would benefit all constituents.
Here's a loaded question.
That's an example. Like,
and I'm really, right from that exact question.
The feedback loops are closing. That's not like a healthy sign of a culture being able to communicate.
Oh, that's 1,000% true.
We can speak on this on every level.
Did you ever see that happening?
Yeah, that's why I stopped drinking. No, it's funny. I said, I
don't know that I ever saw that coming. And I know you're right. Now, here's what I want to ask you. It's like, I find it's not putting you on a pedestal. It's something else. It's not that. What I'm thinking is this. When you come into an organization and you say, typically you're working with the ones that have some sort of vested control, right? I got that. How are you able to navigate everyone else in the organization? So let me see if I can say this clearly. If we were talking about how you best benefit those you serve, and they happen to be the ones that have some element of control, well, they don't succeed unless the people in the organization help them. They can't keep firing everybody. So therefore, you've got to rely on the other people. I would wonder that there has to be some inherent cynicism of those that are under the controlling parties, thinking possibly it's like, oh my God, is this another division of the HR department? Is this another division of the sales trading thing? How do you get everyone buying in?
Well, I don't. That's not my job.
Okay, got it.
That's the job of the CEO.
Great.
So
okay.
I wrote this down. Where
do it, please.
Maybe this will be helpful. Control needs responsibility.
Okay.
And responsibility is a call to awareness, which is tied to the education of the individual. And that takes teacher. So, for example, King Philip II, he's the one in Macedonia. He's created the army. Well, banded the tribes together, set the systems, developed the varying tranches of what troops are going to go where and how they're going to train. He hired a mentor for his son, Alexander the Great, a teacher, to be pupiled by. His name was Aristotle. Alexander had King Philip's base of systems, processes, men, pride, history, story, yada, yada, yada. And the mentor to give him, it was Nietzsche that said, I owe my father a debt to living, but my teacher of how to live. So by no means, and I'd love to pursue academia someday, but I'm not literally, and I would argue nowhere near an Aristotle, but in the spirit of being someone that's dedicated their life with a passion to serve those in positions of power like Alexander the Great. There's a teaching element, there's an advisorial element, there's a consultative guiding element to people in power. That it's nothing new. Great attorneys serve confident, character-based
Yoda
law. So what'd you say?
Yoda.
Well, and that's the value of having counsel. So, in my estimation, the executive officer influences the culture is greatly. It's not an end-all be-all, but greatly, because they're execute, right? They're acting, they're doing, the chief
Right.
doer. And the doing is less of doing like doing themselves, but more of what we're not doing, where we're going, how we're getting there, what resources we have, who's on board. Those are complex and consistently evolving learnings and unlearnings. And so the people matter.
Yeah.
For the culture to matter, those people have to have a voice. The lowest common denominator is equal as a person. Their level of education, their level of maybe competence in all aspects of the business. It would be odd for it to be greater than this chief executive officer, but that doesn't mean that they don't have information we need.
Right.
So my answer is with how I operate and how as a firm we deliver various services, it's more behind the scenes. Not and there's plenty of colleagues that go in and they may be articulating value, serving a purpose, the aunts and uncles of the organization, talking to the employees, the executives, so on and so forth. Human resource, for example, I believe it oftentimes can be perceived as who cares? That's like the cultural milieu. I don't think that it is irrelevant. I think it's as relevant and proactive because it's inherently reacting to the organization's growth. It's going to be proactive, proportional to the proactivity of the leadership, how well they're interacting and building trust amongst each other helps, because the resource, it's a resource of all sorts of valuable initiatives outside of, pay and which are very valuable because incentives and so on, and the betterment of people for the people. So it's not the people are worse and the leadership's more important, or the leadership is worse and the people are more important. It's both matter. And the order by which, example, and this is nothing, all right, let's say that somebody, if I mean, the simplest way to put it, if I interacted consistently with someone that wasn't in operating control, they would likely just outgrow the organization and go do something else.
Right.
So, and there's people that do that. I mean, disenfranchised employees get counseled and then they get better and then they go other places. Meaning now, if disenfranchised employees get counsel and improve, and the company is actually improving at that rate or faster, they'll likely continue being with the organization.
Stick around and enjoy the ride.
It's not an either or. It's an and how. And so I believe in influence. I believe in
how. Okay.
Yeah, I believe in influence, and I believe and in how, and I believe
like
in the order matters, and I believe that the how leadership relates to each other, how they interact. Do they ask? Do people lower in the hierarchy feel safe asking that next question or raising their opinion? How do we get them there? How do we do that while we're under pressure? How do we do that? So these big questions, very contextual, and there's like all these things to learn that takes years, and then there's all these all this dialogue in between, contextually problem solving, and we're, like I said in the beginning, and this is more of a theory, that our proactive capabilities, whether it's an individual or an organization, it's going to be rooted to Kierkegaard, right? Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. It's going to be rooted to how we project our plan. This is where we want to go. This is why. This is how we think we get there. What did we do in the past? Are we self-aware enough to look at that and figure that out so we can figure out what we don't want to do?
Right.
The more that we do that, we're proactive. Now, what are we going to get, John? We're going to get results.
Yep.
But if I have results, if I now have a customer, I have to actually service, I have to react. That undermines my proactivity. Now I'm a hypocrite. Oh, wait, I was already a hypocrite. So that creates knots in organizations. Proactivity creates reactivity because proactivity creates results. Results creates reactivity.
Reactivity, exactly.
Reacting, or are we responsible? Responsibility, blah, 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 blah.
Jay, how now?
Talk to myself. I don't want to talk
I
to myself. I care about you. I want to know what you think.
I love that. So my thought is, I also like to get like in the human element of personal relationships. I've been thinking it's like, so when you're outside of an organization and if you're amongst your friends, you're with Jenna, you're talking to me, whatever the case may be, I'm always curious. Like, I find that you are one of the most inclusive, wide open. You just demonstrated. I want to know what you think. You literally just said the words, right? Well, my thought is, one of the best ways you want to be authentic, it's like, speak your mind, which I always had a hard time doing, you know what I mean? But it's like, speak your mind and then make it really readily available for the other person to either get a turn or respond without somebody jumping down their throat. I think about the social dynamic of me and you, why I find you as such a great business person without, again, putting you on a pedestal, is the fact that I watched the dynamic work on a personal level. And that's, to me, like the inherent root. I don't think there's massive differences between the way that people conduct with amongst friends, colleagues, as opposed to a business situation. To myself, it's like you've got tighter timelines with business relationships. You've got hard objectives, but I believe, and I think I watched you do it, was that sense of just making certain that the other person's point of view mattered. It didn't mean you have to go change your mind because I agree or disagree or, whatever. And I feel like one of the coolest things that happens is, look, I'll say to you directly, it's the one way that I will do better than acknowledge you is simply this. It's you are part of a group of people that have taught me that if just by allowing people to have a full breadth of information, that by allowing that to be, I don't need to agree with you. I don't need to, you know what I mean? I just need to understand you. And then I get to make a decision. Do I work for you? Do I be your friend? Am I your boyfriend? You know what I mean? Like based upon, okay, here's the total picture, or as much as, time permits, right? And I feel like one of the coolest things that an organization can do that you actually do is the other person's point of view matters as much as yours. But it doesn't make it more right than yours, and it doesn't make it more, important than yours. It simply means that I just want to know where you're coming from. I simply just want to know where you're coming from, and it's a safe space. Just let me know where you're coming from. And I feel like you've done that with me. We've disagreed with things. We've had social media conversations, and I feel like everything got solved the moment that we had the conversation of, okay, so that's where you're coming from. Oh, okay. And typically that took about a minute. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, I got it. Right. Oh, here's where I'm coming from. Okay, got it. Great. And we've gotten tighter, I said, because we've done the work, but it's because we've allowed ourselves to have an equal part in regards to, here's where I'm coming from. Am I leaving anything out? Am I unclear here? Am I saying anything that's not making sense? And we did it personally. I feel like your best gift in an organization is the fact that I'll bet you make everybody else feel that way too. Yeah, it's great that you can, read 10,000 books a month, and that's awesome. But I think the most important thing that anybody could do, and you embody it, is enable somebody to be like, okay, I'm actually heard. Do with the information whatever you want, but I'm actually heard. Do I understand you correctly in regards to giving people that sort of open forum in business, personal, like all that stuff?
Yeah, I believe maintaining that
Mm-hmm.
that choice is in contention with power.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what you mean.
Well, because, I won't really know I couldn't tell you if I was so certain that I'm going to be the Jay that you believe I am in our relationship now, in this when there's even less consequence for me not being that person. Like who I am, or what I'm how capable I am of being the best of what I think I can be, or maybe we as a culture think we can be, will be revealed in the consequences that we do or don't have to suffer. Like if I can get away with anything, will I still be this guy that you paint me to be? I think about that a lot. Like my goal is to be a good person.
Yeah.
Like my goal is not to alienate, is not to be alone. And before I started leaning into people, I felt alone. I felt alone. Why would anyone want to hear what I had to say when I wasn't listening? So I'm figuring it out. It seems to be, the book seemed to articulate all of them, like, listen, tell the truth. So I appreciate the acknowledgement, and my intention is to be what it is that I'm trying to say in the world, and trying to learn and represent and figure out how can I become a successful person, all encompassing. How can we become successful? Those that have given me the opportunity to serve, and giving us as an organization the opportunity to serve, the people that rely on us to grow so they can build their life, right? Those would be those that are employed by the organization. I think about these things. It doesn't. So I work very hard. I think I do to listen. And because I spend a lot of time talking to myself. That's not a very healthy way to interact with other people.
It's not.
And so the position of the chief executive officer grants me, and grants anyone that it's in that position, at a level of complacency in that behavior, meaning it's a part of the role until it is acknowledged and worked through and is combated. Being in control is a call to responsibility, which is a necessity of awareness, which is a call to values, like living them, right? Not just talking about them.
Right.
So I think about these things. And I appreciate the acknowledgement, and I'm trying to be a good example, and failing, consistently in various mediums that we can save for another day.
Good.
No,
but
I'm
now
teasing,
he's all the question is fail forward. Hey,
one thing I think it'd be important to say, though, because there's a lot of opacity.
Sorry. I'm
doing this. No, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, right.
I'm doing these to improve, to self-develop.
Right.
You asked some questions where I was a bit opaque, intentionally trying to do this for the audience. I feel insecure that I want to give a little clarity on that. How we work as a firm and who we serve and how we go about that is very personal, and professional confidence is very important.
Yep,
So
I got it.
I try to go on these shows and focus on my personal experiences, the knowledge that I believe I've accrued that could be helpful. I try to focus on ideas and not case studies and references.
Perfect.
At the acknowledgement, I want the audience to know this, because they shouldn't just believe what I'm saying. It would be helpful for them to think about how what I think helps or hurts or whatever them. And I just want to at least acknowledge that, because I'm not getting clear on certain things because I want to sidestep the question. If I'm going to be doing these types of interviews and things, I have to focus on the content and my experience, as opposed to the real-time scenarios that I'm responsible for that, is sensitive to people's lives. And so that creates, attention, because it would be easier on me to just kind of like say, hey, this is all the things we're doing. But that would actually hurt, in my mind, other people and reflect bad on our firm. So I think it's good to say that, so you don't look like you got this for you. I think it's a respectful thing to say to your audience and you as a host.
Appreciate it. Absolutely appreciate it. Works for me too.
You're trying to focus on the ideas.
Then, and that's where we'll stay. Hey, last question for the moment is this. You coming back again?
No.
There's your mic drop moment, folks.
Of course.
John Duffin here with Duffin Media.
I was like, I mean, you gotta have a little fun.
You have to have a lot of fun.
And
Jay Doran, thanks so much for being here.
You've been on the Culture Matters podcast. You got to check it out. You're
right. The Culture Matters podcast. I have been on
episode 119.
Series. I've been on a few times so far, and I'm damn grateful for that. Jay Doran, thanks so much for showing up for me, my friend. I really appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for showing up for us for another episode of Your Message Received. John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Have a fantastic night, and we will see you soon. Be well. Talk soon. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.